and many thanks for joining us. I'm Tabitha John. This is the news from ABC. Ethiopia and Estonia expressed commitment to take part in strengthening relations of European and African unions. This came while Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid has conferred with the Ethiopian counterpart here on Wednesday. Daniel Kasahun has the following account.
Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid, who is officially visiting Ethiopia, has conferred with Ethiopian President Dr. Mulatu Shomet to see way forward in the relationship of the two countries.
I think the most important issue we discussed was how transformation can happen really quickly if you get the right environment and if you get the right ideas, and that you need not repeat what has been done by other countries previously, but you need to find your own way into the future using modern technology.
The two sides also saw means to strengthen European Union relations with the African Union.
We also discussed the European Union and African Union relations just ahead, the summit organized by Estonian EU Council presidency. It has been very informative and educative, I would say, for me to understand the thinking in this country, on this continent, so that we could guarantee a fruitful summit.
Currently, Estonia heads the presidency of the Council of the European Union. The 5th EU-African Summit is scheduled to take place in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, in the end of this November, centering the youth, which has become a key priority for Europe as well as Africa.
Meanwhile, Estonian President expressed optimism on Ethiopia's potential in the tourism sector while visiting tourist sites in the northern part of Addis Ababa. Here again is Daniel Kasahun for the details.
Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid has begun her official visit of Ethiopia. She has seen some tourist sites in the northern part of Addis Ababa and expressed buoyancy on Ethiopia's potential in the tourism sector.
Impressive to see the history and where the capital for this country once was. And what is very inspiring for me is to find a humble palace, a really humble place, which shows that the emperor was more thinking of people than personal comfort. And this is also very inspiring also in this century.
She also told ABC that her country will cooperate with Ethiopia in harnessing the sectors through information technology and capacity building schemes.
I think our country is maybe able to help your country in digital development, in how to make current technologies to work for your people. Technology helps a lot to develop the country, to cut the corners and to get there quickly. So I hope we can work together.
In her stay in Ethiopia, the president is scheduled to meet senior government officials, meant to boost trade and investment ties of the two countries.
Very huge, $500.
Ethiopia and Qatar inked agreements to advance their economic and diplomatic ties. Ethiopia has also expressed its interest to contribute towards the peaceful resolution of the recent diplomatic crisis in the Gulf region. Sarat Mohamed Sani has the details.
On his visit to Qatar, Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn and the accompanying high officials had been given a warm welcome by Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani at the National Palace in Doha. The two sides deliberated on trade and investment as well as peace and security. The discussion is said to bolster the socio-economic ties and also ensure mutual benefit.
Concerning economic ties, there is a huge potential. There is a huge economic liquidity in this country. There are companies interested to invest in Ethiopia. Some of them are already in Ethiopia, for instance like Izdan. So the discussion is mainly aimed at increasing the investment flow between the two countries.
Ethiopia is also said to play a role in solving the recent diplomatic crisis between Qatar and some Arab countries in the Gulf region.
Concerning the current situation in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf area, Ethiopia's stand is based on principles and neutral. Ethiopia mainly supports the peaceful resolution initiated by the Kuwait Emir Mohammed Al Sabah. Geographically, this region is closer to us, so we would like to contribute our part to resolve the situation peacefully.
The two sides also inked an agreement on waiver of visa requirement and investment protection. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Hailemariam has also held talks with officials of Qatar Foundation, which is set to provide support to the health sector in Ethiopia.
Qatari investors have expressed keenness to explore investment opportunities in Ethiopia. Prime Minister Hailemariam has held discussions with investors at Doha. Here again is Sadat Mohamed Sani for more on that.
Qatari investors have held talks with Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn. The session reviewed how the Qatari investors can tap the investment opportunities in Ethiopia. The investors also briefed the advantage and the potential of the investment sector in the country.
Ethiopia as a country has tremendous potential with 100 million population, which is growing very fast. And of course, with the middle income portion of the population is growing very fast, which becomes a market for your investment. And Ethiopia has also a huge advantage in terms of geographic location.
The investors also expressed their interest to lure the investment potential in Ethiopia, especially in the agriculture sector.
Ethiopia as one of the best investment destination, and I think your visit today will support this and encourage our investor to look at the opportunity as the size of the economy and the growth and the natural resources. I think it's one of the best destination for this investment.
It is indicated that the fruitful deliberation between leaders of the two countries has aroused the investment flow from Qatar to Ethiopia.
Both the government and investors of Qatar have shown interest to invest in Ethiopia after they understand the conducive environment in Ethiopia. Now, most of the investors have already identified the area they can work on, and they will start operations soon. On the other hand, Qatar's population has a huge purchasing power and they are big spenders. This will have advantage for our tourism and service sectors.
It is to be recalled that the two have signed investment protection agreement on Tuesday through their economic ministers.
Ethiopian Horticulture Producers and Exporters Association (EHPEA) and companies who work in the cut flower industry in the country are participating at the 8th International Floriculture Trade Fair Expo, which is being held in the Netherlands this week. EBC learned the participants of the trade fair are exhibiting the globally renowned flowers Ethiopia produces and exports to the international market. The event is serving all segments of the floriculture and horticulture industry chain. More than 250 companies are taking part at the fair, according to the Ethiopian Embassy in Brussels. Participants also noted that the floriculture industry is increasingly becoming one of the most attractive investment arrays in the country. The IGAD Secretariat has launched a network that works towards protecting biodiversity in the Horn of Africa. A ministerial meeting has been held in the African Union on Wednesday to launch the Horn of Africa Wildlife Enforcement Network, HUEN. Abraham Asrat has more on that.
The Horn of Africa suffers from a threat on the life of its biodiversity. Poaching and destruction of the biodiversity is a common phenomenon in this region. Therefore, IGAD has taken the initiative to establish the Horn of Africa Wildlife Enforcement Network, HUEN, to tackle such problems.
But why that we need to integrate between the IGAD Secretariat work and HUEN? And I think the reason is obvious. We are trying to enhance wildlife law enforcement agencies' work in our region as much as possible. We understand how important wildlife management is in our region.
The establishment of the Horn of Africa Wildlife Enforcement Network, HUEN, is very crucial in order to address the problem. The HUEN can serve as a formal platform for countries in the Horn of Africa to deeply cooperate and collaborate.
The initiative has the backing of the African Union, European Union, and the United States, among others.
And as we all know, the illegal wildlife trade is not only a conservation issue, but also a health, economic, and above all, a peace and security issue on a global scale. Wildlife trafficking has devastating impacts on both animals and people.
The achievement in establishing the network is taken as a milestone in the work toward combating illegal wildlife trafficking in the region.
AU Rural Economy and Agricultural Commissioner Yetsyetsngyeteba says equitable access to land could pave ways to the youth empowerment in Africa. The remark came while a three-day land policy conference kicks off on Tuesday here in Addis Ababa. Kiflayesusabebe has more.
Efforts of enhancing equitable access to land by youth will significantly contribute toward the realization of the Africa we want as envisioned in Agenda 2063. Rural Economy and Agriculture Commissioner of the African Union, Yetsyetsngyeteba, said equitable access to land could pave way to the youth empowerment in Africa. She also said inclusive participation of the youth in decision making and empowerment through access to land and other resources will unlock Africa's economic potential.
The African Union Declaration on Land Issues and Challenges in Africa was adopted in 2009, calling on African governments, our regional economic communities, and stakeholders to prioritize land policy development and implementation and apply the framework and guidelines on land policy in Africa in their land policy development processes. We are building consensus, raising awareness, generating evidence, developing capacities, and improving coordination to enhance the implementation of the African Union Declaration on Land, helping to address some of the most daunting challenges.
Agriculture and Natural Resource Minister Dr. Yetsyetsngyeteba said land is one of the major resources that should be properly managed and used for the benefit of current and future generation of our people.
Land is one of the major resources we have in Africa that should be properly managed and used for the benefit of current and future generation of our people. As agriculture, the mainstay of the majority of the population of the Africa and its future development is heavily dependent on designing and implementation of the appropriate land policy, land use plans and integrated natural resource management systems. Effective and land policy with appropriate implementation mechanisms promote secure, equitable access to land by an array of the beneficiaries, including smallholder, pastoralists, and agro-pastoralists, women.
The minister has called on Africans to jointly strengthen the African-owned land policy platform through strengthening African Land Policy Center, which is recently launched and institutionalized.
Eritrean refugees residing in Addis Ababa demand the African Union to pressure Eritrean regime to respecting its people's democratic rights. The refugees have demonstrated against the regime at the headquarters of the African Union here in Addis Ababa on Wednesday. Religious freedom, democratic rights and justice are among the demands of the protesters. Let's take a look at the compiled story.
The fascist rule of Eritrean government is causing trouble on its own people and the region at large. The Eritrean people are forced to leave their country. For instance, there are about 70,000 migrants here. We came here to aware African Union of what's happening in Eritrea.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
The demonstration is to protest the existing lawlessness in Eritrea. The regime caused people to flee, and we are now source tragic international news related to migration and deaths in the process. For a long time, it's a dictator and one-man rule in Eritrea. We object this. We demand democracy and justice. As African family, we want the Union to know this and give us support.
One
African leaders call for more local solutions to insecurity on the continent and less reliance on Western intervention. They were speaking at the annual Dakar International Forum on Peace and Security, which brings together presidents and government officials from host Senegal, Rwanda and Mali, as well as military and experts to discuss security challenges. Abraham Master takes up Reuters dispatch.
African leaders at the fourth Dakar Forum on Peace and Security in Africa on Monday said African states needed to do more to ensure security in the region and end reliance on outside forces, but needed to rethink its military and defense strategy against extremism to achieve this. Under scrutiny is the building and deployment of the new G5 Sahel force, a long-awaited multinational military unit in Africa's Sahel region, which started operations to counter escalating Islamist insurgencies this month. Speaking for the President of Chad, Prime Minister Albert Fahimi Hadaki said it was time for joint African forces to lead in the fight against Boko Haram and Islamic extremists through a new planned African Rapid Reaction Force, CARIC.
I salute the actions of the mixed multinational force of the member of state of Lake Chad and the Benin against Boko Haram and the ongoing deployment of the mixed G5 Sahel force.
Addressing the delegates, Senegal's president said African nations need to rethink their military strategy.
The time has come, I feel, to seriously rethink the doctrine of the United Nations peacekeeping system. We cannot maintain peace where there is none.
France was represented by the Defense Minister Florence Parly.
Avec ma collègue allemande, nous avons souhaité au mois de septembre dernier organiser.
Along with my German colleague, we wanted to organize last September a donors conference to ensure an increase in financial support for the joint G5 Sahel force. This initiative is being completed with a contribution from the European Union of 50 million euros and more recently has become bilateral, with the United States bringing $60 million.
The United States this week promised up to $60 million in support, but that fell short of hopes by France and others that Washington would back direct funding from the United Nations.
Zimbabwe's military has taken over the public broadcaster and other public buildings in what looks like a coup, a day after they issued threats to the ruling ZANU-PF party to stop the purge of former liberation fighters. According to AfricaNews.com, the army denied staging a coup in an early morning television broadcast on the state-run Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, stating that they are targeting criminals around Mugabe. The military's announcement follows hours speculations after armored cars were seen blocking roads to the presidency and other state institutions. The army says the insecurity in the party is creating instability in the country, which they want to address. That's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Thank you for watching. Have a good time.